Okay, guys, several of you asked for a video on solving equations. So I'm going to demonstrate solving linear equations in one variable for you. There are lots of different types, so I want to just give you the basics of, how you take care of these. I'll do your first example, 5x plus 3 is equal to 18. I'm trying to get you guys to understand about undoing. So if you recall, I always ask you to bubble the variable. In this case, I only have one x, so it's easy. Bubble that variable, and then ask yourself, what operations are happening over there? Remember, your equation has a left side and a right side. So what's happening over there on this side of the equation with the variable? I see a multiply times 5, so I'm going to write that down. Multiply by 5. And I see an add 3, so I'm going to write that down. Add 3. Now, I know my job is to undo these. I have to undo them. So in order to undo these, I have to use what we call inverse operations. And our inverse operations undo each other. Add and subtract undo each other. So if you have a subtract, you use add. If you have add, you use a subtract. Multiply and divide undo each other. And they work the same way. If you have a divide, you multiply. A multiply, you divide. So now the question is, which one should we undo first? So if you go back to when you first learned about order of operations, you learned parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract. So if you were simplifying an expression, sometimes your teacher said, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Okay, that's what they were saying. So parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract. So this is the order, the hierarchy, when you are simplifying an expression. Well, I'm going to scratch these two off because I'm not so worried about those two in solving equations. This is the part where most students get confused. So if I'm going to solve an equation, I'm going to undo backwards. So I'm going to undo add and subtract before I undo multiply and divide. So this one comes first and this one comes second. So now you have to ask yourself, okay, well, how do I undo and add 3? Well, I subtract 3. So my first step would be to subtract 3 from both sides. And these 3's will zero out because if I have 3 and I lose 3, then that's nothing. So that leaves me with 5x. Okay, now over here, this is where I ask you guys to think money. Okay, think money. You have $18 because it's positive, you've got it. You spent 3 because it's negative, you spent it. So you have $15. Okay? So now my operation that I have left is this multiply. So I've taken care of this one. So how do I undo a multiply by 5? I use a divide by 5. And in algebra, we use a fraction bar to show divide. The 5's divide out. So I get x is equal to 15 divided by 5. And 15 divided by 5 is 3. So the solution to that equation would be 3. Okay, so let's look at another one. Let's try 9x minus 14 is equal to negative 77. So the steps are going to be the same. I'm going to think I've got a left side and a right side. I'm going to bubble my variable. Okay. And so what operations are with the x? I see this means times when a number is next to a variable. So I see a multiply by 9 and I see a subtract 14. So I have to undo those. So remember, I'm going to undo add, subtract first, and then multiply, divide. So this will be my first step. This will be my second step. So how do I undo a subtract 14? I have to add 14. So I will add 14 to both sides. Okay, so now these are going to zero out. And so on the other side, like I've said many, many times, you need to think money. Think of money, okay? So what this is saying is that I have $14, but what I want to buy at Walmart is $77. So I am short. Okay, that means I'm negative. I'm short. How much am I short? Well, I'm short $63. How'd I get that? Well, I took the difference between those because I know that I didn't have enough money. So I have now 9x is equal to negative 63. So I did my undo subtract 14, check that off. Okay, so now how do I undo a multiply by 9? I divide by 9. Okay, so I'll use a fraction bar. I'm going to divide both sides by 9. 9 over 9 is 1. That gives me 1x, but in math we just write x. And so now over here, some people get confused on what sign should it be. Should the answer be positive? Should the answer be negative? So I have this little tool you can use. Looks like a little smiley or funny looking face, okay? This 9 down here is positive, so I'm taking a negative divided by a positive. So I will cover up, in my case I'm going to scratch it out, a negative and a positive. Whatever is left is the sign of the answer. So it would be negative, and 63 divided by 9 is 7. So the solution for this equation is negative 7. So this trick works for multiply or divide. And anytime you are, we call this combining, you need to think money.